After struggling to find a role in Phoenix over the past 2 seasons, Bol Bol is finally getting an opportunity with the Suns, and he's taking full advantage of it. Over his last 11 games, he's averaging 14 points, 6 rebounds, 2 blocks, and he's doing so on great efficiency. And with this recent stretch of good play, it's got people talking about how good Bol Bol can actually be. If you ask some people, they would say that Bol Bol can be a superstar, and that if you watch him play, you'll see that he can do all the same things that Victor Wembanyama can do. But then if you ask other people, they would say that Bol Bol is just a highlight machine. And the truth is, we just haven't seen a big enough sample size with Bol Bol to really predict what his future career is going to look like. So in today's video, I want to provide more context on Bol Bol's entire basketball career, and hopefully with that added context, it gives you a better idea of how his career may turn out. Before the 2019 draft, Bol Bol was arguably the most polarizing player in that draft class. When he eventually slid to the 44th overall pick though, he definitely became the most polarizing player. And that's because if you watched him play at Oregon or even in high school, the talent was just so obvious and the potential was just so obvious. Because in the 2010s, we started to see more and more bigs that had very versatile skill sets come into the NBA and find success. And Bol Bol seemed like another player that could do that and find success in the NBA. So the potential was clearly there, and he put up incredible numbers at Oregon. The problem is he only played 9 games in college because he had ankle and foot injuries, and the most notable injury that he had, the one that was causing concern, was a stress fracture in his foot. And we've seen big men like Yao Ming and Bill Walton have similar injuries in their feet, and those injuries ended up derailing those guys' careers. So immediately people were already concerned about Bol Bol's durability. But another reason why he slid so far in the draft is because there were concerns about his attitude and his character. In high school, Bol Bol played for 4 different schools, and when you transfer a lot, especially in high school, that can hurt your reputation, because coaches get upset with you if you play for them for a year and then you just transfer to another school. Scouts kind of wonder about you. Even college coaches can become wary of you because they might think that even if you commit to their school, you might end up decommitting and going somewhere else if you find a better option. And then even though he did put up great numbers at Oregon, there were concerns that he was just coasting on his talent, and there were scouts that wondered if he could truly be a leader. In a Bleacher Report article before the draft, there was a scout that said, "His resting demeanor makes him look aloof, like he might rather be sitting on the couch. I don't really think that's his fault. He's not that different from most guys his age. He's not a vocal leader, but he's also not a bad egg. More than most, it'll depend on what kind of team drafts him. If they have a great culture, I think he'll really excel." And looking back, those concerns about him coasting on his talent may have actually been right. We all know that he barely played with the Nuggets over his first 3 seasons, and there were many people who blamed the coaching staff for that. They said that, this is a guy who obviously has so much potential, the coaching staff just isn't giving him opportunity. But in his 4th season when he went to the Magic, he actually had an interview where he admitted that he just didn't really work that hard in Denver and that he could have worked a lot harder. And that level of self-awareness appeared to be a really good sign, and it looked even better considering how his Magic tenure started. Over his first 37 games with Orlando, he was getting a good amount of minutes. He was getting about 26 minutes a night. He started in 32 of his first 37 games. And he was putting up pretty good numbers, and he was scoring the ball efficiently. He still wasn't a perfect player. There were many people who were very critical of his defense, but at the very least, he was showing a lot of offensive upside. Unfortunately, things started to go wrong for Bol around the midway point of the season. He had to enter health and safety protocols, which caused him to miss a few games. And then when he came back, his role drastically reduced. He was only getting about 16 minutes a night. He only started in 1 of his last 33 games with the Magic, and his offensive production had just dropped off. Over those final 33 games, he only averaged 5 points on 46% from the field and just 8% from 3. And with that limited offensive production, combined with the defensive shortcomings that he had, it just made him a very negative player. But we have to remind ourselves that Bol Bol barely played in Denver. So even though he was in his 4th season when he was playing with the Magic, it was really his first year where he was actually playing consistent minutes and had a real role on an NBA team. So he was still adjusting and learning how to play in the NBA, and it didn't help that the Orlando Magic were just a bad team that year. They finished 13th in the East, and, just like the Magic always are, they were horrible on offense. They were the 26th best offense that year, and for a guy like Bol Bol, who has all this offensive talent and is still adjusting to the NBA, putting him on a very bad offensive team kind of made him feel like he had to overcompensate. And so, yeah, there were a lot of times where Bol Bol would get the ball and he would get tunnel vision. And that led to a lot of bad sequences for Bol Bol where he just didn't look like he knew what he was doing, or he looked like he was trying to overcompensate and do too much. But now that he's playing with other talented offensive players in Phoenix like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, he hasn't had to do as much, and it's making him more efficient. On the screen, I have a comparison of Bol's average seconds per touch, average dribbles per touch, and points per touch with his season in Orlando compared to this 11-game stretch that he's had in Phoenix. And as you can see, he's not holding the ball or taking as many dribbles, and it's making him more efficient. At this stage of his career, Bol just isn't this great ball handler and passer that some of the highlights kind of portray him as. He is only 25 though, and again, he hasn't really gotten consistent minutes in the NBA, so maybe he can develop those skills going forward if he has a more consistent role. But in this 11-game stretch that he's been having, he's showing us real ways that he can contribute. During this stretch, he's been playing most of his minutes at the 4, and to be having a 7'3" guy playing the power forward position is just a huge mismatch, and he's been exploiting that on catch and shoot opportunities. Because even if he's not wide open and he has a guy closing out at him, because he's so tall, he can get his shot off easily over anybody. And the thing that's impressed me is his willingness to shoot. When he was with Orlando, he wasn't really taking many three-point attempts. But in this stretch with the Suns, he's shooting over 5 attempts per game, and he's shooting a good percentage from 3. And because he's showing that he can be a threat from the three-point line, that's opening up driving opportunities for him. The Suns had a game against Memphis recently, and Bol had a play in overtime where he caught the ball at the three-point line. I believe it was Zach Edey who was closing out at him, but Bol was able to fake, put the ball on the floor, and then hit a floater. And that's another thing with Bol Bol. He's showing that he has really, really good touch around the rim. He could hit floaters off the dribble. If he's in the dunker spot, you can get him the ball, and even if he doesn't have an open lane for a dunk, he can hit these soft little short shots around the basket with relative ease. He's also been a huge threat in transition, and overall, by playing this role as more of a play finisher on the offense, he's been super effective. And when he's been on the floor in this 11-game stretch, Phoenix has an offensive rating of 120, which is really, really good. And then on the defensive end, I've seen positive signs from him. Sure, he's not a perfect defender. There's still times where he can get pushed around. His awareness isn't always the best. There are moments where his timing on blocks is a little bit off and he can be a bit late. He can get called for goaltends, but he has showed good signs. I've seen many plays where the timing on his rotations have been good, where he's been able to come over and get blocks. There's been times where he's boxed out effectively, and then because he's so tall, he can just rise up and grab rebounds over anyone. And what really made me want to make this video was a Kevin Durant interview that I saw recently. Basically, Kevin Durant was being asked about Bol Bol and how he's been playing recently, and he was praising him. And one of the biggest things that he said that really stuck with me was that Bol Bol is really a student of the game. And considering all the narratives that he had early on in his career about his character, about his attitude, people were questioning if he really loved the game of basketball and if he was just coasting on his talent. And to hear Kevin Durant say that he's a real student of the game, and even when he wasn't getting minutes last season or for the first half of this season, he was still embracing improving, and he was listening to the coaches, listening to his teammates, doing what he could be asked to improve, and we're seeing the results now when he actually gets minutes. I do believe that Bol Bol was probably coasting off his talent to a degree in high school and college, and then when he got to the NBA, he was humbled. But a lot of players come to the NBA and they're humbled because they're talented at lower levels of basketball, and then they get to the NBA and it's just a whole different animal. But as I touched on earlier in the video, Bol admitted that, he wasn't working as hard as he could have when he entered the NBA. And even though he's had limited opportunities throughout his NBA career, like Kevin Durant said, he's still been mature. He's still trying to improve day after day after day. And lots of players just aren't mature enough to do that when things aren't going their way in the NBA. So everyone's talking about Bol now and saying that, he's showing so much potential, he can be a superstar, all-star level player, and who knows, maybe with more opportunity he can develop into that level of player. But I think it's unfair to put those expectations on him after a short stretch of good play, and it's just not the story that we should be focusing on. This is a guy who I just said was kind of humbled when he came into the NBA because he was so talented, and he had to work his way up from the bottom. He's realizing that he doesn't have to overthink the game or over dribble or try to do too much. He can just use his God-given abilities with his shooting, his touch, his finishing around the basket, and he can be a very talented offensive player. And then we're seeing those strides on the defensive end. He's being more active and making more positive defensive plays. Again, he's only 25 years old. There's still lots of room for him to grow. But let's not try to just predict exactly how his career is going to go and just focus on the fact that this is a great story and this is a guy who's finding his place in the NBA.